Do you love sourdough but wish it was just a little bit easier and less fuzzy? Well, today in this video, I'm going to show you my super simple sourdough method and how I bake two different types of bread that couldn't be easier. And you'll probably wonder why you haven't jumped on the sourdough wagon before. One is going to be a darker whole grain German style sourdough bread, and the other one is going to be a lighter sandwich bread. Let's get right into it. Because I have been traveling for a long time, my sourdough is dormant with a lot of flour, and I kept it in the refrigerator, so I need to wake it up to reactivate it with some warm water the night before. And I have some other videos in which I show exactly how this all works, but I have had people make fun of me that this is so stiff that I'm going to break the fork. No, I'm not breaking the fork, but I am trying to reconstitute the kind of consistency that I'm going for, and that is a thick pancake-like batter. And yes, it won't be perfect, but my method is kind of eyeballing it and not very exact, which is perfect for me and for many other sourdough bakers who just really don't like a lot of detailed instructions. I'm adding just a little bit of flour because I feel like it is just a little stiff to my touch. And then I'm just going to let it sit on the counter overnight at room temperature, lightly covered. You'll see how it looks like the next morning when I'm ready to bake. So we're going to put that lid on and go to bed. The next morning, before I'm getting ready, I am going to grind my grains. This is my whole grain German Vollkornbrot, my whole grain bread. And I love the Grand Teton's Ancient Grains Spelt Berries. It's family-run company. I love all their ancient grains, and I have been using mostly ancient grains recently versus regular wheat. And then I have some rye. That gives the bread a little bit of a deeper flavor. And then I have Khorasan. The trademark name is also Kamut, so you may know it as that. And I'm always mixing it up. I am not necessarily going for a particular mix or ratio. And then I have some einkorn, but I don't have that here in this drawer, which is at the bottom of my kitchen where it's kind of cool. And then in this homemade flour sack, if you will, I have some flaxseed that gives the whole bread a little bit more nutrition, but it also makes it stick a little bit better. But again, totally optional, not 100% necessary. When I'm ready to grind my grains, here's the einkorn that I found, and I apologize for the lighting. I was battling my schedule for baking and the sun's position on the horizon. But what you just saw me add was caraway seeds. And I don't necessarily like biting on caraway seeds, but caraway seeds are perfect for sourdough because the essential oils in the caraway seeds really favor the good bacteria that we're trying to get the good cultures in the sourdough. And this is a very coarse grind. This is perfect for, again, my German whole grain bread that I love, that I grew up on, and that I make all the time. I'm adding some salt. Salt also helps a little bit with the sourness of the bread. The more salt, obviously, the saltier, but the less sour your bread will get. And then I'm adding water. I don't have an exact measurement for the water. And here is my sourdough starter. I have to say that after all these years of baking with sourdough, it still makes me so happy when I see that it's full of bubbles and happy and activated and airy and everything. So that's what it is. Here you can see what it looks like after I have removed most of it, but not all of it, because we'll need that for the next bread. I'm adding water as I go, and just remember that whole grains, especially when you have a very coarse grind, soak up water over time, so you can make your dough just a little bit softer than you might think you need it. But again, this doesn't matter because you will see that we're not going to shape it into a loaf. I'm putting a beeswax wrap on top and letting that sit at room temperature. Here's that rest of sourdough starter to which I'm adding water. And again, I call myself the queen of eyeballing, and I'm scraping out little bits and pieces that are stuck at the bottom because all of those pieces help with the next sourdough starter. So essentially, I'm giving it a feeding because I need more than what I have right there. And then I'm just going to stir it up. And again, I'm just going for thick pancake batter like consistency. I'm not measuring. You can always measure flour and water at the same weight, which will give you pretty much 100% hydration sourdough starter. But I feel like after all these years, I have it down. I also love my Sour House dough bed, which is essentially a warming plate for my sourdough, and it's going to warm my bread dough and my sourdough at the same time. I am baking these breads in a loaf pan, and I think this is so beginner friendly because there's no shaping and you will never end up with a flat loaf. It won't go anywhere because it has these sides. Here's that sourdough starter that I activated and added some more flour and water to. And now let's check out my bread dough for the dark bread. It actually looks really good. And before I'm going to add the seeds, I'm going to show you how much it has risen. It's perfect. It's light and fluffy. And to add a little bit more to the mouthfeel and chewiness and crunchiness, I love to add sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds. Again, this is totally optional. You can also add nuts or don't add any seeds at all. All I do is just mix them in. The more you do that, the better they will be distributed in the final dough, in the final bread. And I have greased my loaf pan, and then I'm adding the dough to the loaf pan. You can make it as fancy on top if you want or not. I'm just using a little pastry fork here to give it a flat top. And then I'm letting it rise again on the dough bed with a beeswax wrap covered so that the top doesn't dry out. This got a little bit ahead of me. I was working on something else, so it has domed. It has probably risen a little bit more, proofed a little bit more than I wanted, but I'm going to bake it at 350 degrees for about 90 minutes. If you'd like to learn more about my sourdough method, which is so different, I have an entire course that teaches you everything that I've shown here and more, and you can check it out. I'm leaving a QR code here, and I'm also going to leave a link in the description box below. This is the sourdough starter that I added flour and water to, and it is also extremely happy, which makes me very happy. And if you're a regular sourdough baker, you know what I mean. For the next bread, I'm actually using my olive oil sourdough bread, which is usually more of a bowl-shaped bread, but I'm going to bake it sandwich style in a loaf pan. And yes, for that, I am weighing measurements because I don't need to reinvent the wheel. What I loved is that my sourdough starter was floating in the water, which usually is a good sign. It's not the only sign that your starter is good, but it's a good sign. I am grinding some grains. I have a ratio of maybe 60 whole grain and 40% all-purpose white flour to make that bread a little bit lighter and not quite as heavy and dense as the previous one. And the olive oil just adds a little bit notch and a little softness and some really good flavor to it. Danish dough hooks are amazing. You don't need to do any stretch and folds. Just mix it all up and let it sit there. The sourdough starter just goes in the refrigerator, the leftover, overnight or whenever I'm ready to use it. And again, greasing my loaf pan. Let's see what it's done overnight. So I had it sit in a cool kitchen, not a cold kitchen, but cool kitchen. We're talking maybe 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm just going to give it a very quick shaping because, as you can see, it is a very soft, very sticky dough. I might have been able to add a little bit more flour, but I didn't, and I didn't want to, and you'll see later what that does to the crumb. I just want to shape it really briefly, very loosely, again, not shaping it or doing any stretch and folds, but just maneuvering it a little bit into a shape that I can put in the loaf pan. And you could shake that a little bit to make it a little bit more even. Mine was a little higher on one side than the other. Here's my favorite little hack for cleaning your counter, which my bench scraper, and I think this is why it's called a bench scraper. And then all you need to do is just wipe it with a sponge or a cloth, and it is absolutely clean. If you're enjoying what you're seeing and you'd like a little bit more help and a little bit more resources, you can also check out my sourdough book, Sourdough Simplified, which is exactly what it is. It has all my method and all the questions that you might have in the beginning. And then I have a bunch of recipes in the back, including these type of breads that you can make in your home. I'll leave the link here and in the description box below so you can get your own copy. I love doing a whole bunch of things and not babysitting my sourdoughs or my bread doughs as they're rising. And this one rose a little bit more because I was in the middle of something else and then kind of forgot about it. But I wanted to show you that this is real life and sourdough can fit into your schedule and you don't need to babysit it or adhere to a very strict schedule. So we'll bake it. And after it was done, it was maybe an hour and a half as well. I was trying to get it out of the loaf pan, which essentially I did get out, but it stuck to the rim on the upper side. And here it is. We're going to let it cool off. Now, this is the whole grain bread, the Vollkornbrot, and I'm going to show you what that crumb looks like. It is still, after all these years, my favorite bread. It has a very dense feel. If you love European breads, you will probably appreciate that. But if you are more interested in a traditional, let's say more American style sandwich bread, then this is, look at this crumb. It is super soft. It is super airy, fluffy. It's almost like Wonder Bread, but no yeast, no baking powder, just sourdough. You can also check out my entire sourdough playlist. I'm going to leave the link for you below, where I have a ton more recipes and a ton more videos and tutorials so that you can feel really successful with your sourdough baking. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you feel inspired. I would love it for you if you started baking your next sourdough bread right away. And if you have questions or comments about that beforehand, or once you're in the process, leave them in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.